Okay, this is a short video tutorial for solving quadratics. So we're just going to review the two methods that we've learned. That's the square root method and factoring for solving a quadratic. Note that there are two additional methods that we're going to get into this year, but we haven't come to yet. So we're only going to focus, like I said, on these first two methods. Okay, so the very first example here is a quadratic because the degree of this term is 2. So when it has a degree of 2, it's automatically quadratic, and we should expect to get two solutions. So in a problem like this, the fastest method and the one that you're going to try to rely on the most often is the square root method, because you're going to like it the most. It's the one where you just have to isolate the variable and then take the square root. So that's our goal here. We're going to try to isolate the x squared term. So I'm going to divide out the 3 first, and I end up with x squared equaling 12. I'm now going to take the square root of both sides. And if you have trouble with simplifying radicals, you might want to watch another video tutorial on how to simplify radicals. But here I'm just going to simplify this radical, and I end up with x equaling 2 root 3. Now I made a mistake here because I've forgotten something, and whenever I take the square root of the number, I need to always make sure that I write positive and negative, because there are two solutions here for this x value. X could either equal positive 2 root 3 or negative 2 root 3. Okay, now I'm going to actually add another problem here. If I have something that looks like this, I still want to try to use the quadratic formula. Or sorry, not the quadratic formula. I still want to use the square root method. So in this problem here, so let's call this 1a, I would like to use square root method because I can isolate this term here pretty easily by just dividing out the 3. So I'm going to divide out the 3. And I'm left with x minus 3 squared equaling 16. Now I can take the square root of both sides, and I'm left with x minus 3 equaling, and again, this is really important, you have to make sure you get your two cases here, positive and negative 4. So now I break this up and I have two possibilities. X minus 3 could equal 4, or x minus 3 could equal negative 4. I solve each of these, and I end up with 7 and negative 1. So if you had not taken positive or negative here, you'd only end up with one solution, and that would be from here. So you always want to make sure that you really remember to put that positive or negative whenever you take the square root of a number. A very common mistake that I see here is actually, so let's start back with the original problem here. A very common mistake that I sometimes see is students will FOIL this out. They'll multiply the 3, they'll subtract 48, and they'll start off with an entirely new quadratic. They do a lot extra work here when they can simply use the square root method. Okay, so in problem number 2, I want to put this one on here because now we can't use the square root method. The reason why we can't use the square root method is because we can't take the square root nicely of that term here. Okay, so even if we tried to isolate the x or the 6th term here and then take the square root of both sides, we just can't take the square root of this. So instead, we're going to rely on factoring. So when you have a trinomial here and you cannot use the square root method, the next method you're going to try to do is factor. We have to find a product of negative 6 and the sum. So we're finding the sum of two numbers whose product is negative 6 and sum is 1. And those two numbers would be negative 3 and 2. So we end up with x minus 3 and x plus 2 equaling 0. We get two solutions now by the zero product property, and I'm left with x equaling 3 and x equaling negative 2. So if you need more help on how to factor, there is a short tutorial on factoring as well, so you can go to that tutorial so that you can see more problems like this. Alright, the last example I have here is factoring again, because again we cannot take the square root of both sides here. So I'm going to factor here. And in this case, I'm going to take out a GCF because I'm able to take out an x term from both of these. So now I just made this, right here, it's an addition problem on the left-hand side, I just made that into a product. So now I can use zero product property, and I'm going to set each of those sides equal, or each of those parts equal to 0, and I end up with a solution x equals 0 and x equaling negative 6. So there's a very brief review in solving quadratics using the square root method and factoring.